Greatest invention ever. It's got to come down to just one. And it's not the wheel. It's not fire. It's a system of accounting. No, a system of accounting, yes. It's an invention so powerful it would lead to philosophy, science, and inventions like these cool gadgets, like with a screen that we're on right now. It is so powerful, and it all started with counting sheep. And there's a secret to it. That particular secret that unlocked its full potential came way later in the process, and it's so simple, and I'm using it right now, and you use it in every word that you speak. So stay with me until the end, because we will learn the code that changed the world. I am Mr. Hull, and this is Ancient History. Welcome to Classical Kingdoms, where timeless stories reveal truth and wisdom for your journey. So think about the most important contract that you've ever been in, an agreement, a covenant, a very serious, solemn promise that you made, and it needed to be written down. It was so important, you had to write it down. And whether it was a promise to a friend, a deal with your parents, imagine that deal getting recorded. Well, we said it needed to be, it was so important, but you record it on little clay tokens that have just markings on them, no words, and you put the tokens into a clay ball and it hardens, like a coffee mug with no top to it. It's a clay ball. And someday later, if you disagree or you're not sure what the agreement was supposed to deliver and be about, what do you have to do? You have to crack open the clay ball. It's called a bulla, and it's the world's first contract and world's first system of records. And it solved a problem, the simple problem of trust, but it created something far more powerful. It's technology. It's technology that would allow humanity to end up writing all kinds of things, all kinds of records, including thoughts about how to make civilization and the world better. So why does this simple innovation from the past matter so much today? Well, I have to ask you, who is the writing for? Who is the designated audience when you write something down? Like in that promise, you were writing down the tokens, and it was the contents of the covenant, the promise. But who was supposed to be reading it? Because you already knew what was there. Consider that as we move forward. Who is supposed to be reading what is getting written down? And that's going to affect the development and the innovation and the improvements over time. Because if you could imagine a world without writing, then think about all that there wouldn't be. There would be no history. And that's technically the exciting part about this lesson. It is the beginning of history because it's the beginning of written records. So if there was a world with no writing, we would not have history. We would not have records. We would not have the accuracy because it would be oral tradition. It would be stories being told over time. They get altered. They get forgotten. But that was the human experience for thousands of years in the fertile plains of Mesopotamia, where farming was abundant. That's the place where this changed. The same place where civilization started is the place that's inventing the written word, records. And it's the foundational movement of civilization. And it makes sense. But we need to unpack everything that developed over the hundreds and thousands of years that this took to unlock the permanent records about our thoughts, our laws, our beliefs, and our discoveries and ways to make things better, because it's also a story about innovation. This lesson of writing begins with the accountant who was just trying to solve a very practical problem and get his work done. And it's one particular transformative idea that these writers, these scribes, were actually trying to do that is the biggest unlock, and that'll be coming up by the end of this video. So stay with me throughout this entire lesson so that you can uncover the secret ingredients of innovation and especially records. Written records get invented right here in this lesson. This is lesson number 6 in your ancient history course. We are stepping into the story of the birth of written records. So in this lesson, we will first uncover the secret origins of writing in Mesopotamia, discover how the world's first script, not an alphabet, was the way to manage economic records. It's called cuneiform. Next, let's witness a struggle for power. We'll analyze how ambitious rulers are going to take advantage of this new writing system. Then we will reveal the hidden genius of the Babylonians in some new things that they were writing down, their ability to write down code that's actually mathematical. And that helps them engineer their challenging world. And finally, we will trace the development of the alphabet. It doesn't get developed until way later. And it develops because they are uncovering the reason for the writing. Who is this writing even for? It's going to unleash a wave of abstract thought across the world. And that's really what this course is all about. You're in an ancient history course. This is a complete course of classical kingdoms, and I'm excited to share this one with you because it is truly the beginning of history. It's the beginning of human civilizations at the next level. This lesson begins in ancient Sumerian city-states like Ur and Uruk and Lagash. You've already heard about these in a previous lesson because this is where civilization starts. But let's go back to 3400 BC. These cities are booming. Their abundant agriculture and their surplus crops are getting them rich. They're growing in size. These cities are complex. And the leaders, remember, how to be a king means that you're a leader who will face the logistical challenges of running this hustling and bustling ancient kingdom. But how do you keep track of all the surplus goods? You're producing all kinds of things that have to be stored, grains. How are you supposed to keep track of it all? And we are talking about massive quantities of grain. If you were the agricultural leader back then, you understood people are going to cash in on all of their surplus crops, but cash hasn't been invented yet. We have to record it. You've got livestock, you've got ox, you've got sheep, you've got countless jars of pottery filled with things that are going to get stored in the ziggurat. And without a system, it would be chaos. And if you were the king, you would not be doing a good job right now. So let's stop and pause for a skill builder. Just now, in my classrooms over the years, I would always ask students to make this record. Pretend that you are in this time period and that you need to make a record, a lunch record, a food record, because this is all about food, isn't it? Make a record where there are no letters. You're going to record what lunch you had. What lunch could you tell me about without using letters, without using numbers, without using punctuation, without drawing with colors? You can only draw the symbols. And you need this little card, and you need, you can only use one color. And it actually should be a card smaller than this. If you want to know the truth, these early records were tiny. They would fit in the palm of your hand like a small Post-it note. And this record is supposed to be your lunch. So let's say that I'm offering to pay for your lunch and you need to show me the record of it so that I know what you got and I know what the amount of money is. Oh yeah, so you have to have the amount of money that the lunch is worth. You know, what it costs. So we would do this at school. Kids were either buying or they were packing, and they had to record whichever lunch that they had. Okay, well, here's mine. I cannot use any letters. I cannot use any punctuation or symbols. So reading from left to right, what do you think I had? What I always have. Do you have any clue? You know, I'm actually eating breakfast for lunch. It's 3 eggs. How many of you thought that was a potato? 3 baked potatoes. No. Bacon and eggs. And then this I looked it up actually because the Mesopotamians used a stalk of grain for their barley, and it literally looks like a stalk of grain. So this is the original writing system, that you're just drawing tiny pictures of food, and they can't be too complicated like this. Do you know what kind of grain that is by chance? Any farmers out there? Those are oats, steel-cut oats. So I'd bake an egg, steel-cut oats. This one's pretty tricky, I think. Does that look like a blueberry to anybody? And then if you had a blueberry next to a cup, blueberry yogurt. And at this point, the context of the entire, like, you know that the number 5, and you know you had to record the amount $5, roughly $5, because I made it in my kitchen. That record of food, if you were an ancient Mesopotamian, wouldn't just be one lunch. It could easily be 6 months worth of lunches, if not way more. It could involve livestock, grains, all kinds of things that the Mesopotamians needed to have. It needed to be recorded. And if you were the king, you were the queen, if you were a farmer, you needed this clever solution. And it was getting developed slowly over time in a free market society. People were trying to just develop ideas that worked, and it changed over time. It doesn't start with an alphabet. That doesn't get invented until way later. But what they had was clay, and tiny little clay tablets that would fit in the palm of your hand, and you would use a stylus. They invented stylus also, styli, and it was literally like a third of this size. I should have made mine smaller, but I've seen them in museums. And it's kind of exciting. If you go to one of these museums that has the ancient artifacts in them, they're recording deals on these little tiny clay tablets. And if you go to that original system, they recorded them on little tokens, and the tokens would go inside the hollow clay ball called the bulla. That was the bulla system originally. So at whatever point they realized it's kind of silly to just keep these little tokens, the little records inside of the bulla, and then break the bulla open whenever you needed to check the records. Some clever scribe realized, why don't we just, write on the envelope, essentially. Don't stick them inside the container, but instead just write them on the little tablets. 3300 BC is about when this system of writing is being used, and that's what archaeologists have been able to find and dig up and even decode and be able to read them, which is how we know the contents were about food. The contents were about the surplus crops, and we know ziggurats were used to store. But it was kind of a eureka moment, when the scribes were developing something that you didn't have to break open, that you weren't just writing on these little tokens, and it's called Proto-Cuneiform. Cuneiform is this early system of writing. So that's the invention that started it all. It doesn't finish it. You will see how things changed over time, because scribes and people that needed to read it still needed better than Proto-Cuneiform. Proto meaning like the prototype, the first cuneiform. It's the world's first writing system, accounting system. It's like a spreadsheet. Have you tried using spreadsheets before? Really powerful grids where you're writing quantities, and it does the math for you. Consider they would have had to do this all manually. And if you were a scribe, you would be the highest educated person. Very few people would be scribes. That would be a job in great demand. If you were a scribe, you could work for kings and the wealthy, and you would be wealthy yourself. So these entries, when we try to read them, we see, 5 sheep in the temple of Inanna. That's one of them. You can decode these. And for 500 years, this was the latest and greatest, the Proto-Cuneiform. And the economic administration of these kingdoms was made better. And these are the kingdoms that thrive, the ones that use this writing system. They do the best. It's good old-fashioned innovation, invention, and it was created just through people trying to make things better for society, better for their civilization. In segment 2, let's take it to the next level. What's going to happen? We have invented the pictographic writing system, the cuneiform that is Proto-Cuneiform, the first one. where little symbols like that represent an ox. Does that look like an ox to you? It looks like an ox to me, more or less, or the donkey. The donkey kind of looks like a donkey. But this was a system that developed over hundreds of years that people could recognize. And the only people that needed to recognize them were the people that were actually reading them. The scribes, the business people, the government leaders. And these little clay tablets are part of the greatest invention that's ever been made on the planet. And that makes these very important scribes some of the smartest and most important people that have ever worked for kings. But this second segment is about the king and what could the king do? If the king is in his throne room, the king is in the room, he says, let's level up the writing. Let's not just record the wealth. Let's not just record the food, but let's record the power. The power. The king is all about the power, and he is realizing that pictographs and written records could be more than just business records. So this is the beginning of the change, and this monumental shift is going to let kings tell us more than just how much surplus crops they have. The rulers began to make permanent records that are going to establish their authority, their power. Now, this sounds like something you would want. You want better civilization. You want justice. You want the king to be in charge. You want to secure a legacy that's going to make your civilization the best. And this scenario is set with writing continually improving like a new technology. Ambitious kings wanted to protect their power and build their authority and make a better society. Doesn't this sound good? It's what this market of people improving everything, it's what they're trying to do. So let's skip to 2500 BC when huge records, we have discovered steles. So let's take a look. Steles that were not business records. They were public monuments. They weren't tiny little clay tablets. They were something that people could see. What is the writing even? Who is the writing even for? Think about that question as we continue. If the writing is for the people that are following what the king says, when they saw the stele of vultures. Oh, yes, the stele of vultures. That's one of the first ones, and we have it. It celebrates a military victory by the city-state of Lagash over their rival, Umma. Your enemy has been defeated. Umma is going down, and one side of the stele tells about the god Ningirsu holding the enemy soldiers in a giant net, showing the victory is what? Why do you have a god in your stele? Because the divine powers approve of what you're doing. Remember, the writing is for who's reading it. And this isn't really reading. Now we're using pictures, we're using information. The other side of it is more historical. Instead of being the divine, the other side shows the king and Natum leading his army with strength and courage, leading him into battle while the vultures are carrying off the heads of his enemies. Now, what do you think about that message? Put it in the chat right now. Is this something that we still do today? How does this compare to the images and the messages? And he's comparing himself to one of the greatest victors ever with the help of the gods. And you would say, if you were one of his subjects, you would say, this guy is strong. I wish I could be his sidekick. I'll do anything this king wants me to do. I will lead him because I want to see my enemies go down and our civilization to thrive and go better. But we have another problem, another layer of power that you haven't yet cracked into. Another century and a half later, there's an Akkadian king named Naram-Sin who took it to the next level to make sure his power is going to be better than what was done previously on a stele. So let's get another stele. This is the stele of Naram-Sin. And he's not just the sidekick to a god or getting approved by the gods. He is going to do what? What would take it to the next level? How do you become a god? He portrays himself as one. Put it on a stele. That's how you can become a god. He's showing himself larger than his soldiers. His soldiers are following him. He's bigger. He's wearing a horned helmet that is symbolic for the deities of Mesopotamia. They were polytheistic. They had lots of gods. So how do you become a god? Well, first of all, be in a polytheistic society. Second, make yourself a stele so that you can see that. And then get creative, right? Because we're going to literally trample our enemies beneath the feet, and he's going to walk up a mountain up into the heavens. So does this surprise you at all? Like, this is radical. It's public. It's declaring his absolute divine power because he's claiming that he's the God. Now, this lesson has shifted significantly since we were counting sheep and ox and donkeys. And now here we are recording the divine victories of some of these Mesopotamian kings. Let's do another. The cylinders of Gudea of Lagash. He used it to record service to the gods, his piety, the piety. He created the Gudea cylinders, which are massive clay cylinders, and they're going to detail, they've got a lot of cuneiform all over them. They're going to detail the construction of a temple to the city's god. And he's recording how the god actually came to him in a dream and gave him these divine instructions. Now think about that for a second. So it's not a victory over his enemies, not trampling or having vultures come eat, but he is receiving information from the gods, instructions, and who could argue with the gods? It's about power and authority. And this is now messaging. It's marketing, propaganda. And it's pretty brilliant, and it's going to make strong societies in Mesopotamia, and it does. It's peaceful power achievement through messaging and convincing people. And it's completely different as a vision of what makes a great ruler to just being good at farming. Come on. Can't you just be good at farming and record your surplus crops? No, we have to be gods and put it on steles and get our messages out to people. Have you put it in the chat right now if you just realized the way world leaders do this exact same thing? Have you ever heard that Kim Jong-un's grandfather invented the hamburger or the cheeseburger? The rulers of North Korea claim to be gods, and you could see their authority in the messaging that they give. So we're just learning the lesson here. We're in no way condoning these practices. We are simply on a journey of history, virtue, and wonder here at Classical Kingdoms. But ultimately, these old ancient kings are trying to build their authority not for bad purposes. They're not trying to oppress people or just be in control. They want a better society. And that's the reason why they're the first civilizations on the planet. And that's the reason why their legacy endures, because they had some good intentions. So there's one more thing we should add to this that will help them with their power, and that would be rules. Have you ever seen a classroom with rules on the wall? When the teacher puts the expectations up, have you ever seen going into a classroom and having limits placed on you, whether it's a school uniform or not being allowed to use chewing gum or a technology device as a distraction? Let's take this power to the next level. The power that just helps a society have justice, be run well. And these ancient Mesopotamian kings are not like the Kim family of North Korea, using their power and holding people back. These are Mesopotamian kings who wanted their civilizations to move forward, to grow, to be some of the greatest. And that's why we're studying them now. So what is that one next thing that would help their authority and help civilization be better? And that would be a code of rules. Have you been in a classroom where the teacher puts rules and expectations on the walls? Let's do it in our civilization. Let's do it in our city-states. So one of the earliest and most famous written codes of law is based on the idea of an eye for an eye. You've heard this before. An eye for an eye. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. This is something that dates back to Mesopotamia, the 23, 24, in the Akkadian kingdoms of Mesopotamia. So that there's some sense of justice. If you cause injury to somebody and you poke out an eye, you're going to have to pay an equal just price. You'll lose your own eye, or you'll pay a monetary fine. And they were writing these things down now. So now we're getting into sophisticated legal records that are going to aim themselves at restitution, not so much revenge, but to be restored if you have caused damage, to show the value of what 2 shekels should be used when you knock out somebody's tooth. That was one of them. If you knock out somebody's tooth, you cause injury to somebody, they lose their tooth, the law says 2 shekels. And that was an ancient law, an ancient code. There's going to be way more of these coming soon in a future lesson, because people see there's a benefit to having rules, to follow expectations, and to make these a part of your society, to make this part of your city-state. And it's why Mesopotamia is known to be the first best, and they're inventing writing, and they're using it well. Let's shift in the third segment. It's about 1800 BC. It's the Babylonian ancient period, but we find evidence that they are writing math. They are using the written records as a tool, as like a guide for math to help solve the problems of surveyors. Remember all that land they use for agriculture, they're farming, they have surplus crops. It's very important to survey and measure and record your land. The engine behind this math is the number system that they're also credited with inventing. When they invented the wheel, they had to say 60. Sexagesimal base 60. The number system based on 60, 360 degrees in a circle, and 60 is the base of the sexagesimal number system that is going to make so much possible. Now, people get so worked up over base 10, right? Base 10 is used for everything. Our stock market used to have fractions. People get so worked up over this base 10 number. When I was a kid, they would say we're going to shift to the metric system because that's base 10. And it did happen in the stock market. I don't know if you follow stocks, but if you go back in time, they used to use fractions and shifted it to use the base 10 number system. But I was told that base 10 is just superior to everything. But it's not, because if you take a 10, you divide it by 2, you get 5. But that's about all you can do with it. You can't divide it by 3 without having a 0.33333 repeating decimal. But in base 60, sexagesimal base 60, you can do so much more with the number 60. Divide it by 5, and you get the number 12. And 12 is way better than 10. Believe it or not, think about all the things you can do with a 12. 1/4 of 60 is 15. 1/5 is 12. And 12 can be divided in half. It can be divided into thirds, into fourths. The computational power of the base 60 number system. When I was a kid, I wasn't really impressed by it. I thought, 10. We've got to... I was convinced it was like propaganda coming from people. They were like, you've got to convert to the number 10 and use metrics for everything. Yeah, that's not going anywhere. But the number 60 shows up on a clock, 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour, a circle that has 360 degrees, and the Mesopotamians invented circles. And the Mesopotamians invented sexagesimal. And here on this document, the Babylonian times, we see them using it. But what were they using it for, and how? And how do we even know? Because remember, we're supposed to be asking, what is this writing for? What people? It's for the people reading it. It's not for you writing it. So who is supposed to be reading this mathematical code? Well, the reference that I'm making here is called the Plimpton 322. The Plimpton 322, because for decades, scholars looked at Plimpton 322 as an early example of writing, and they just thought it was a string of random numbers. But when they started to look at the computations behind it, they found this was actually sophisticated trigonometry, sophisticated relationships of angles and triangles. Now, Pythagorean theorem, the Pythagorean triples. Pythagoras is someone that you'll learn about in a Greek lesson because of his understanding and his Pythagorean theorem, right? That was the simplest, first best triangle formula, but we're seeing the beginning of the understanding of this kind of natural law of triangles. The Babylonians understood how triangles work and how there's triangles in every circle. There's triangles in every 60 degrees of a circle. Everything is a triangle. And by using this math, the Babylonians are brilliant. But it leads to this question, what were they making this for? What kind of practical tool was so important? And I already told you it was surveyors, because think about how the flooding rivers would mess up the boundary lines. And think about how important private property ownership is. When you plant seeds into the ground, you have to trust 4 months or 5 months or 3 months, whatever it takes for those seeds to come to maturity. You must own the land at the end. Imagine your frustration when the floods come through and they've altered everything. You go to the king and you ask for help. And that's what would have been happening here. They want good records. It's helping society. It's helping people. And when it came to measuring land, Plimpton 322 shows us that it's really pretty complicated if you want to be a land surveyor. George Washington was a land surveyor. It's not an easy job. And the things that he did helped us start a great civilization here. The Mesopotamians are the ultimate proof that they could apply abstract theoretical knowledge in order to be better engineers, to be smarter, to be innovators, to invent something. This is the classical journey into history, virtue, and wonder. I wonder what else we could do with the sexagesimal number system or with Pythagorean theorem. So what do you think is the most impressive application of this so far, whether it's the writing or the math? How have you imagined what this does to civilization and why these are the first best civilizations on the planet? So leave that in the comments right now. And if you haven't already subscribed to the channel, we need you to click the like button and subscribe, because it really helps the channel so that people know that Classical Kingdom is a complete ancient history course. Thank you for sticking around for this segment 4, which is the tiny little key that unlocks everything in writing moving forward, because this tiny little key isn't here yet, but in segment 4 it gets revealed, and it's something that we're still using today. It's an impressive discovery, because for 1,500 years after these cuneiform writing systems were being used, it's still considered a complex and highly skilled craft if you are a scribe. These scribes had to know hundreds and hundreds of different symbols, if not thousands. And the same is true in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Egyptian hieroglyphics were also a pictographic system of writing. And their development on papyrus tablets, because that's papyrus scrolls, that's something that are very beautiful, and they've given us more religious content on the Egyptian records than what the Mesopotamians were doing. But neither of these early pictographic number systems have this little tiny thing that needs to be used and is used. It's being used. They were using it. They just didn't know how to invent it, because it was a major problem with the different writing systems that everybody was trying to use. To become a scribe, you needed years of difficult training, and that made this literacy the exclusive property of a small elite class. That is a major problem. You can't have people reading these records when it's only a few people that even know how to write them. As trade expands across the Mediterranean, merchants and sailors Merchants and sailors, they needed the simpler, faster, more efficient system that we're about to discover right now. It will help them keep records. It will help them not need a scribe. These people were not cheap and they were not abundant. You couldn't just find a scribe anywhere. The practical need for this better way to do business is the free market's approach to develop innovative solutions. It's the single greatest revolution that is happening by these merchants and sailors. The breakthrough comes from this incredible insight, because here's what's been happening. Getting away from pictographs means that you need to take little symbols and give them a phoneme, give them a single sound, give them what we are used to today, like the letter K has a K sound, a phoneme. The first step is around 1850 BC by a Semitic-speaking group of people that were living in Egypt. They cleverly adapted Egyptian hieroglyphs and turned them into letters that make sounds. It's the acrophonic principle, and here's how it works. Let's take the pictograph, like the word that makes a certain sound in the language, like the word for the hieroglyph for water, mayim, for the Semitic, and they used the hieroglyph for water to use this little symbol for mayim, and then they just said, well, that's going to be M. So the symbol is going to stand for the first sound of what that word does, the first sound of what the word does. Have you ever made an acrostic? You know, like where you line up the first letters and kind of like build a special word or a memory device? That wavy line becomes the letter M, sound. And look at our letter M, like a wavy line. How about another one? The hieroglyph for an ox head, which was Alf in their language, or Alp in their language. It became the symbol to stand for the first sound of that word. And that is alphabet, A-L-P. This is the beginning of the world's first alphabet. It's an unexpected result. They didn't set out to invent an alphabet. But because they're in North Egypt, they're trading along the coast with the Phoenician traders that are on the sea. They were the master traders of the Mediterranean Sea, and they're sailing all over the place. They've been sailing and trading with the Minoans. They had a colony way over in Carthage across the Mediterranean Sea. They know the Greeks. They know the Trojans. They know everybody. And they are spreading this idea through their business records. And they are streamlining the system down from thousands to hundreds to 22. 22. How many letters of an alphabet do you actually want? Is 22 enough? But we have a problem. In those 22 characters, they're only consonants. They don't have vowel sounds. The simplicity of this whole thing is genius. And it's really exciting that merchants and sailors who are not educated scribes are the ones that are forcing this to happen. They're not forcing it. They're developing it and using it, and people are adopting it because it's easy. It makes sense. It's simple. It's genius. It's a solution. And it's changing the world. So what am I missing? I already told you. What are we trying to develop? Because the Phoenician alphabet has no vowels. So you could write these words, but the full sound of the language was not perfectly accurate. And you had to kind of guess. So the final crucial step is going to happen when the Phoenicians are trading with the Greeks. Over hundreds of years, the Greeks will adopt the Phoenician system, but they made the one transformation. It was an innovation. It was the greatest invention. This is it. The Phoenician alphabet missing vowels, the Greeks are going to put them in. They're going to put in the vowel sounds. The Phoenician letter aleph, which was a consonant, became the Greek vowel alpha because the Greeks weren't using it for anything else. The Greeks rearranged the use of these things. The letter epsilon, the letter E, wasn't being used. And so we're going to use it for a missing vowel sound. And the vowels have been sneaking around this entire lesson. They've been sneaking around ancient Mesopotamia. They were not being used. That was the pictographic system. And hieroglyphs, pictographic. And then the alphabet of the Phoenicians and the Hebrews, missing some of the letters that everybody needed. But the final simple innovation unlocks the intellectual potential of actually communicating full concepts, full words. Like, it's not just limited to ox, donkey, sheep, barley. It laid the foundation for the explosion of brilliant ideas in literature, philosophy. Democracy is going to come. Classical Greece, with their invention of the alphabet, that puts them in first position, moving into this classical period. When we get to it, that's some lessons in the future, but it is the future of us, the future of our Western civilization. The ability to perfectly record complex, abstract ideas and thoughts for anyone who wants to read them. Who is the writing for? It's for whoever wants to read it. What an incredible journey of written records, the written word. Now that we have an alphabet, we can say the written word. We've seen it grow from that humble accounting tool, clay tokens, the Bula system in Sumer, and we watched it become a tool for kings to show their power. We saw Babylonians master abstract math and engineer their world, and this final tension of words made with only consonants as the Greeks put vowels into the alphabet. And essentially, we're still using it. The Latin alphabet is an offshoot of the Greeks. It's all born from the practical needs of those Semitic workers, of the farmers in Mesopotamia, the Phoenician merchants. They all needed to develop something that would work. And that's innovation in its best form. It's truly democratizing writing. It makes it accessible for everybody, for all the people. And it makes widespread literacy. It's possible for you to be literate, for you to learn and understand what's going on in the world around you. And as this Bronze Age period is ending, we've seen thousands of years of the development of writing. And this is ancient history. What will you carry forward from this age, the age of writing and written records? What ideas could you record in your history notebooks and share those history notebooks with other people with your ideas that you will build upon and flip back open and look at what you wrote and how many vowels you used to do it? So thank you for taking the time to learn something that matters in all of history, and that includes your history. Some classical truth for your journey. Because kingdoms rise and fall, power fades, but virtue endures.